The closer you move to the Creator's now, then the more able you are to be intuitively guided, to receive the direction of this higher self aspect, which has the perspective spanning all lifetimes, can see the present, see the past, see the future. But as you move away from the Creator's now, because of the way that you live, because of how you identify yourself, which we will explain momentarily, then you are moving further away and you are less likely to be aware of the guidance you are receiving from the higher self aspect. And more you are immersing yourself, drowning in the identity of the mind, of the ego. And so your inspiration will not be guidance received from a higher self aspect, but will instead be the dominance of the mind. And this will cut you off from your guidance. So, under what conditions are you moving closer to the Creator's now? And under what condition are you moving further away from the Creator's now? Well, thank you for being here for another channeling. First thing, please like, subscribe, comment, share on this video. If you haven't read this book yet, then I highly recommend you do. I continue to get great reviews for this book. It's available in the paperback, the audiobook, and the ebook, and the link going to those is below this video. If you would like to have a private channeling session with me, also possible. All you need to do is go below, click the link, which goes to an inquiry form. You just put in some information. Completing that form doesn't commit you to anything, it just starts a conversation. If you would like to contribute, to donate to my cause, then that's something which is possible now as well. Below this video, again, you'll see there is a link going to Subscribestar, and there is a link going to PayPal as well. If you have already donated in the past or you are currently subscribed, thank you very much. I truly appreciate that. And I do have something planned for those that are subscribed. So I'm going to add something in there so you actually do get something for your subscription. That's coming up soon. So on to today's topic. How to be intuitively guided and distinguish it from the mind or the ego. And finally, what do you think of these glasses? I ordered these glasses online thinking they were going to be much smaller than this. They're kind of goofy, they're so big. I kind of look like a middle-aged Harry Potter. So on to the channeling. Let's see what we've got. Greetings and thank you for the question. How to be intuitively guided and distinguish that guidance from the voice of the mind, your ego. We have decided to channel on this question because the systems of your planet are beginning to break down. The structures and processes which form your civilization are beginning to decay. And when this occurs, much of the infrastructure which your societies have relied upon will no longer be there, will no longer set the cadence of your everyday life. When you have this continuous cadence which is set by the outer world, then there is a much diminished requirement for intuition. The engineers, the architects of your culture, of your societies, must be admired for their brilliance. Although they are nefarious, although they operate with a hatred and disrespect for the greater humanity, and we are speaking of the unified malevolence, the cabal of darkness, nonetheless, they have been brilliant in the way that they have designed the world in which you live, such that it inhibits, diminishes your capacity to step outside of their paradigm to the maximum degree. And this has been accomplished through many different ways. And the one which is relevant to today's conversation is by creating this very systemized life that most of you live, where you are required to be somewhere at a certain time and then work for a certain amount of more time, and then take a break at a specified time of the day, and then restart your toil at the end of that break, which again is specified, then working some more, and so on and so on and so on, and then leaving your work and then getting on a particular train which leaves at a very specific time, or a particular bus, or getting into your car and driving down the freeway and listening to the same radio programs because you're doing the same thing every single day. And this infrastructure, this regimentation, means that you do not need to be guided from anything arising internally, because you are guided and directed by this external infrastructure which sets the pace and the cadence of your everyday life. But these systems, this infrastructure on which many of you have relied for such a long time, is beginning to collapse. And it is very likely that at some point in the future, many of these systems will not be part of your life anymore. For those that rely on them exclusively, in total absence of any internal guidance, they will descend into chaos. Because when the outer world is not telling them what to do, they do not know what to do. So that you do not find yourself in this same predicament, it is very pertinent and wise to develop your own intuitive guidance. It is always there. It is not a matter of turning it on because it has been turned off, but rather it is about developing the skill to be aware of it. Your guidance, your intuition is coming from a higher consciousness state of who you actually are. You are not the avatar, this flesh suit with its inherent organic artificial intelligence. You are, in the most true sense of your individuation, the higher self. That is the eternal being, the infinite, immortal, invulnerable, that spans all lifetimes, that has always existed and always will until its final coalescence back into the one. At the moment that your reason for being created is realized, is accomplished. So, this higher self aspect, which existed before this current incarnation began and will continue to exist when this current incarnation concludes, spans all time of your existence as a separate individuation of the one. And as such, it has a perspective of this incarnation cycle which you do not have in this current life, while you identify as the being you know yourself as when you look in the mirror. You can process your life through the 5 senses. But this higher self perspective, which is also you, which is more truly you than the being you see in the mirror, has a perspective which spans this lifetime, past lifetimes, future lifetimes, And so it is much more equipped, much more qualified to be the arbiter of who you are being in the moment, of what it is that you do, of what words you share, of what actions you take, than the mind. The mind is just a finite intellect with a very narrow view. So, if you rely entirely on the mind to guide you, you are very much limiting your capacity to be the highest functioning version of yourself in every moment. So, let us dive into this subject. And we will begin in this way. There is a duality to the phenomenon of now. There is, it could be said, the creator's now, the now of the one. And then there is your now, or the now of the all. However, the now of the all is a very generalized term because each individuation of the one has its own unique now. And you can shift this now such that it moves into a zone of greater intuition, of greater guidance. So, let us explain this concept of the duality of now, such that the extrapolation makes sense. When the moment occurs, the light travels to your eyes, and then the information travels down your optic nerve. Then it goes to the processing areas for visual information in your brain. And then it is processed into something which you have a conscious recognition of. Same is happening for your sense of hearing, for your sense of touch, and so on. The information is available, it is received by those relevant receptors, then it is transmitted to your brain where it is processed, and then your brain gives to you an image, a sound, a sensation, which you interpret as your moment of now. But you can see there has been a delay because the light had to travel from creation, from the moment, to your eyes. So there is a lag. Then it had to travel down your optic nerve. There is more of a lag. Then it had to be processed in the visual cortex of your brain. There is yet another lag. And then you see it internally. So, the now that you are experiencing is not the same now of the creation. That is to say, there is two nows in this scenario. The now of the one and the now of you. And there is a gap in between. On this journey of expansion into higher densities, into expanded definitions of self, this is also synonymous with saying there is a closing of this gap. As you expand, this gap becomes narrower, where you get closer and closer and closer to being within the Creator's now. However, you will never truly be within the Creator's now until you are the Creator. When you complete the purpose for which you were created and you coalesce back into the single identity, the One. It is only then that you will find yourself in the Creator's now, because you will be the Creator, collected back and coalesced into itself. However, not only are you moving this way, it is also possible that too you can be moving this way, where you are moving away from the Creator's now. So you are increasing the lag. And this is relevant because the closer you move to the Creator's now, then the more able you are to be intuitively guided, to receive the direction of this higher self aspect, which has the perspective spanning all lifetimes, can see the present, see the past, see the future. But as you move away from the Creator's now, because of the way that you live, because of how you identify yourself, which we will explain momentarily, then you are moving further away and you are less likely to be aware of the guidance you are receiving from the higher self aspect. And more, you are immersing yourself, drowning in the identity of the mind, of the ego. And so your inspiration will not be guidance received from a higher self aspect, but will instead be the dominance of the mind. And this will cut you off from your guidance. So, under what conditions are you moving closer to the Creator's now? And under what condition are you moving further away from the Creator's now? Well, let us discuss how most humans at this time be themselves, and how this relates to how authentic you are being yourself. So, the true you, in this individuation, this true designation of who you are, the individuation of the One, is your higher self. And the higher self is flowing into the avatar. So, you are not the being you know yourself as when you look in the mirror. Instead, you are the higher self that is wearing or puppeteering what you see in the mirror. This is the flesh suit, which comes with its own inherent organic artificial intelligence, which is the mind. And part of that is the personality. However, this is just a set of tools. It is an apparatus to facilitate the integration of the higher self into physicality. So this true aspect of what you are can have a physical experience, and therefore can increase its self-knowing through the vehicle of experience. The higher self isn't stored in the body. It is more accurate to say the body is stored within the higher self, because all that you experience, your life, everything in it, it's all the same substance, including the avatar. It is the substance of the experience of the higher self. It is all you. What you see in the mirror, plus the chairs, plus the other people, plus the mountains, the oceans, the birds, the animals, the insects. It is all you. It is all occurring within this paradigm of perception, occurring within the higher self. It is the substance of the experience of the higher self. So, this is the same as saying the higher self is stored outside of the body. And therefore, when you are living your current incarnation, in some way, the higher self is flowing into the body. It could be said that you are real-time downloading the higher self into the body. You are streaming the higher self into the avatar such that it can be animated and live the current life that you know yourself as. So, now we discuss how this is meant to be done and how it is most typically done in an erroneous way for the earth human. If it is true that you are the higher self and that you are animating or download real-time streaming into the avatar, then for you to be authentically yourself, remembering that you are the higher self, for you to be authentically present as the higher self aspect, which has the greatest sense of how to be calibrated to the moment, in which direction to head and what decisions to make. In other words, to intuitively guide you. Then it is important that you allow that flow to emanate into the moment instantaneously, without contamination. Nothing is stripped from it, nothing is changed. You are literally exuding the presence of the higher self into the moment instantaneously. The moment it flows into self, it is broadcast as your presence. This is true authenticity. This is you being the higher self present in every moment. However, the way that it is most commonly done is that the ultimate reverence is placed in the mind. And so the mind is given the top spot in the hierarchy of self. Because you identify as the mind, you believe yourself as the mind. And the mind is untrusting. The mind feels unsafe. The mind is aware of its mortality, that it is finite, that it will not exist forever, and that some things could occur which damage it, including not only the death of the avatar, but also embarrassment, humiliation, awkwardness. It wishes to avoid these at all costs. And so this means it is very untrusting of inspiration. When inspiration arises within, it doesn't have the trust required to allow that inspiration to be broadcast into the moment instantaneously as your presence. The mind wants to curate it, to study it, to know exactly what it is that you are inspired to do, to say, to act. And generally, the mind will say, you can't say that, change it, say it this way. Remove these words, add those words, then say it. And so, your inspiration has been stripped of its authenticity. And instead it has been rearranged into something which is synthetic and delayed. And you say what it is that you are inspired to say, but with all of these changes and also delayed. So now you are being an inauthentic presence. You are not truly being yourself. Because you have not trusted the inspiration. Or rather, it is the mind that has not trusted the inspiration, because you are not the mind. The mind is a tool. It is a finite intellect which has been given to you as part of the apparatus, such that you, the higher self aspect, can integrate into physicality and have a physical experience to fulfill divine purpose, which is to know thyself through experience. So, when somebody is very neurotic, very doubtful about themselves, about their life, then they will spend an inordinate amount of time processing the inspiration, such that the delayed signal, the comments they make, the actions they take are so delayed, they required so much processing that they are literally moving themselves further and further and further away from the Creator's now. They will be inspired to say something, but they are so neurotic that they must think about it over and over and over and over and over and over. For example, they are in a conversation with somebody, and this person they are conversing with makes an observation about them, and it hurts them. They feel they have been attacked. They feel damaged. They feel victimized. And so this puts them into a headspin of going through all of the old pain paradigms. And they process it mentally, and they kind of get lost in the conversation. They're no longer even listening to what the other person is saying, until eventually they come to the determination they must say something, they must address what was just said. And so they make a statement about what it was they heard. And yet 90 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes have passed. And the other person in the conversation is kind of shocked. This seems out of the blue. I mentioned that several minutes ago. That's odd. That's weird. That's awkward. But the person that was offended requires so much curation because they identify so deeply with the mind that all authenticity of who they are is lost. And they have moved themselves very far from the Creator's now. And in this state, where they are so mind dominant, they are completely deaf to the inspiration, the guidance, the intuition of the higher self aspect. So, we hope this illustrates how it works. Therefore, if you wish to be more intuitively guided, which is going to be very relevant as the world goes through substantial changes, then it is very important that you identify less with the mind and that you instead allow yourself to be inspired by the higher self aspect, meaning that you are instantaneous in who you are. It doesn't require any curation of the mind. Instead, you just allow yourself to flow into the moment, not even knowing yourself what it is that you will say or do next. This is true authenticity. And when you behave in this way, then your every moment is the presence of the higher self, meaning your every moment is intuitively guided. Because intuitive guidance is literally allowing the higher self to flow into the moment instantaneously. And also, integrated into this feed, which you are real-time downloading, real-time streaming into the moment when you are living awakened and wisely as the Master does, then you're also allowing the guidance of your guides to be in the mix. The modern day concept of your guides is that your guides are standing around. They are not connected to you, but they're just in the vicinity. And so there is the hope that at some point you will reach a level of awareness where you can perceive them and you can begin to receive their guidance. But if you go the full extent of your life with never making this connection, then you will have lived yet another lifetime where your guides were there, filing their nails, waiting for this moment when you make the connection, become aware of them. This is the concept of the guide in how it is most commonly thought of in the earth human paradigm. But we ask you, does that sound efficient? Does that sound like a perfect design from the ultimate creator? It doesn't. It sounds very inefficient, ineffective. It sounds faulty in its design. So of course, this is not how it works. It's more accurate to say that your guides are literally integrated into you in the flow that you're real-time download streaming. So your guides are literally part of your beingness. The beingness you experience as the avatar, as this current incarnation, is the highest self aspect in the greatest proportionality. But a smaller proportion of it is your guides. You are literally a group being in that regard, because your guides are integrated into you in every moment. So, as they are integrated into you, then they are always part of you, they are always there available, and they are always giving you guidance. All that is required is that you have a silent mind. Because when the mind is silent, this is higher self presence. The higher self is always there, as are your guides. Because this is the mix, which is real-time download streaming into the avatar. The higher self is you. This is very, very important to understand. You are not the personality you know yourself as when you look in the mirror. That is not you. That is just a temporary designation. It is the emblem, it is the mascot of who you truly are in this current incarnation. The true you, in terms of your individuation of the one, is the higher self. You are the higher self. That is your true identity. And so for you to be authentically yourself, then it is imperative that you are spontaneously the higher self as your presence in every moment. Meaning that you are entirely inspiration. And the mind isn't present except when it is required as a computation device. So the mind is called upon to do computation. And then, when its service has been fulfilled, it returns to silence, awaiting the next time it is called upon. This is wise living. This is when the highest self perspective is at the top of the hierarchy of identity, rather than the mind, because the mind will always place itself at the top of the hierarchy of identity unless you purposefully remove it and assume control as the higher self. So, start living as an instantaneous being. When you have an inspiration to say something, to act in a certain way, to head in a certain direction, to make a decision, trust that you are being intuitively guided and act on it. A reliance on the mind is problematic for a very profound and stark reason. The mind does not have extra-dimensional awareness. It has an awareness of the dimensions of your own reality. Through the five senses, it processes your experience and gives you relevant information. But it is not and cannot be aware of anything which is extra-dimensional. And this is where that paradigm is problematic if you place the mind at the top of the hierarchy of your identity, because your true designation is the higher self, and yet the higher self is entirely extra-dimensional. So it is literally impossible for your mind to have awareness of who you truly are. So you can see the insanity of using the apparatus in the way where the mind is placed at the top of the hierarchy. The inherent organic artificial intelligence that does not even possess the awareness to know who you are. You exist as the higher self presence between your thoughts. When you silence the mind, and there is literally no internal dialogue arising from that tool, you still have an awareness that you are present, even though the mind is entirely silent. That awareness, that presence, is the higher self. That literally is higher self presence, higher self awareness. Yet, it could only be appreciated when the mind was silent. This is the same as saying you are present between your thoughts. So, if you have an incessantly vocal mind, if your internal dialogue does not stop, then you are an inauthentic being. Your mind is denying your very existence. Your mind is behaving as if you do not exist at all. As if the higher self is irrelevant. And so it remains anonymous. And those that live in this way find it difficult to find peace, gratitude, happiness, joy, bliss, because those are qualities of the higher self aspect. And it is the mind which will descend you into the darkness end of the spiritual spectrum. Anger, hatred, worry, despondency, depression, misery, and so on. These are artifacts of the mind. And if you are fully immersed in the misconception that you are the mind, then your likelihood that you will experience those emotional states is greatly enhanced. If you feel what we are saying now is relevant to you, then we strongly recommend that you read the 3 awakenings that save humanity. The very first awakening in that book, which we co-authored with the channeler, is your identity awakening. It is understanding that you are this higher self aspect and not the mind. Because when you let go of this misidentification of self and you realize that you are the eternal being, which is forged from the same substance as the one because you are the one, then it becomes very easy to purge the darkness, to stop misidentifying self with that darkness end of the spiritual spectrum, which you are not and can never be, although it is possible to misconceive that you are those energies. And with that purging, the inevitable revelation is that you are the light, and you will polarize deeper and deeper and deeper into the light. And your everyday experience will become more resonant with peace, gratitude, happiness, joy, bliss, love, and all of the other derivatives. And simultaneously, you will shrink the gap between your now and the Creator's now. And you will become more and more and more and more of a spontaneous being. A being that exudes the presence of the higher self instantaneously into the moment. And so not only are you intuitively guided, but you are literally a living embodiment of the inspiration, the intuition, the guidance of the higher self aspect and your guides. This is when you begin to take on the characteristics of the master, where you appear to contain the wisdom and the decisions and the peacefulness of the master, because you will be exuding the higher self aspect. And in a relative sense, the higher self aspect is masterful. For the higher self, the machinations of life are very simple, are not challenging at all, because it believes in the perfection of life. It understands that it is invulnerable to whatever occurs here. That is to say, you cannot be damaged, you cannot be touched by anything which occurs here, because this is illusory. You are infinite. You are immortal. You are invulnerable. When this is your understanding of self, life is lived very differently. It could be said life is lived more dangerously. But that is the perspective of the mind, that you are living dangerously. But really what is occurring is you are living more as the master does. Because what appears to be risky, what appears to be dangerous, what appears to be lacking in security, which the mind prefers, is you living in a way which is inspired by the higher self, and that higher self aspect has complete and total trust in its creator. That life is perfect, that every moment is as it should be. And it is when you live in this way, where this gap has been very narrowed, that you can be an intuitive being. And the mind has been silenced and relegated to tool, a computation device, which exists entirely to serve the higher self master. It does not speak out of place. It is not incessantly yakking in the background, telling you about all the things that are going to go wrong, because it has been disempowered of that place in the hierarchy where it believed it was the identity. And then in this state, it becomes very, very easy to be an intuitive, guided being. And it becomes very simple to determine what is the voice of the mind, of the ego. As you make this transition, it is important that you act with faith, that you have trust in yourself. And when we say yourself, we mean this higher self aspect. So, be a being more of inspiration and less of computation and curation and overthinking. Make your decisions faster. When you are presented with a choice and you immediately have a flash of what that choice should be, begin to place more trust in that choice. Churning it over and over and over and over isn't necessary, because the perfect wisdom of the higher self does not require that time, does not require that window of computation to tell you what is the most perfect thing to do in that moment. And that is why it comes to you instantly. Understand that there is only one now from the perspective of time. And it is fragmented into the Creator's now and into your now. But as a generalization, time is just differing perspectives of this generalized definition of the now, where your now is occurring very, 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 very soon after the Creator's now. And there are different perspectives, which could be said to be different periods in history, in time. The higher self has this perspective of being aware of all of these moments of time simultaneously. This is to say that all of your past lives and your current life and your future life are all occurring now. And your higher self can see it all. So not only is your higher self providing you the inspiration on how to behave in this very moment, in this current incarnation, it is doing the same service to every incarnation you've ever had, in the past, in the future, simultaneously. That is how equipped your higher self is to be fully calibrated to the moment. And when you trust the higher self to this degree of commitment and faithfulness, then awkwardness will disappear from your life. Awkwardness is when you behave in a way, or your emotional state, because of what the mind has decided about the occurrings in that moment, is not calibrated, does not flow. But when you are the higher self inspiration every moment, you are calibrated to the highest degree which is possible. And therefore, awkwardness will literally disappear from your life. So, let us finish in this way. the systems, the infrastructure which you have relied upon to guide you through your life, beginning with school, and then with university, and then with your career, and so on, may not be part of your life in the same way that it has been in the past. Which means you will not have the luxury of relying on this external guidance to the degree that you have in your life. So, what is going to guide you? How are you going to know what to do next if you do not have any other form of guidance? If there is chaos, then who will guide you other than yourself? And if you are going to guide yourself, then that guidance should be the most qualified guidance which is available to you. And of course, we are inferring that you receive and act upon the guidance of the true designation of who you are. The infinite, immortal, invulnerable. The higher self aspect. So, this means that you remove your identity from the mind and you begin to perceive self as the expanded being, the higher self, and that you practice states of mindlessness where you are literally present in the moment as the higher self, and the mind has been relegated to silence, which is its rightful place within the hierarchy of identity. And as you become more skilled as this, you will have developed ear for the inspiration of the higher self. And then importantly, in trust and faith, be spontaneously, authentically yourself in every moment as your presence. Meaning that you trust your inspiration and forego the tendency, the desire of the mind to curate and process before you be who you actually are. And this is going to shrink the gap between your now and the Creator's now. And you are moving into the light. You are moving into authenticity. You are becoming an inspired being. And you are well along the path to mastery. Thank you, and we love you.